All right. Welcome, guys, back to the No Jerry podcast, week 4. This is a weekly podcast by Americans for Americans. We focus on what matters to you as you chase the American dream. Make sure to join our community on X, YouTube, Kick, Twitch, TikTok. E, what are we getting in today?
Today's episode, man, we're going to be covering everything from flash floods to RFKjr's nomination, DOGE and their relentless pursuit of corruption, how media controls how you feel about it, and everything else. We'll also talk about the new proposed bill in Ohio charging $10,000 for ejaculations without the intent to conceptualize. Stick all the way till the end, and we'll cover how your smart devices are spying on you.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I really tried to keep it together. I knew you were going to say it, but somehow I just still couldn't do it. That's okay.
I also was trying very hard to keep it together.
All right. So first things first, on a more serious note, we want to pay our respects and our thoughts and prayers to the families in West Virginia, Kentucky, Arkansas, Tennessee. They've been hit by a lot of flash floods. Another disaster that's hit the home front in the last couple months. So yeah, basically a lot of the flash flood warnings is due to the intense rainfall. There was even a levee in Tennessee that collapsed, causing even more flooding to come through and sweep homes away. The flood in Kentucky has already claimed 10 lives with numerous injuries reported. I got that last night, so I'm not sure exactly how much more development there is in that. But yeah, just want to pay our respects and keep thoughts and prayers and all involved as well.
100% have to, man. It's kind of crazy because, I mean, I don't think there's any correlation in it, but the natural disasters this year just seem to be going nuts, dude. Just left and right, the country is just getting smacked by each kind of disaster you could think of. We're getting hit by all of them this year, so it's pretty crazy to see.
Yeah, it's crazy, too, that it's coming from both coastlines. People are affected on the West Coast and the East Coast. The weather has been, completely crazy. And, hopefully going into the summer, we don't have a crazy tornado season. We can kind of have a good year, good 4th of July, good holidays at the end of the year. All bright future ahead for 2025 for sure. But yeah, it looks like RFKjr got in. What you got on that?
I mean, he finally got confirmed as the Director of Health and Human Services, finally. It seemed like they dragged his nomination out more than anybody else. So basically, man, there's a lot of reasons why it's going to be good, I believe, from vaccine safety and transparency to the focusing on chronic disease and just making the country healthier instead of just trying to combat all these diseases and Big Pharma making bank. He's also anti-Big Pharma, which is a good thing to see. Bipartisan support is something that he actually has this time, which is pretty crazy despite the controversial views that he has, especially on vaccines. He managed to gain support from a lot of Republican senators who were initially skeptical, which is a great sign for him. It's something that he's going to need. It's going to help him be able to push his goals and, actually get things moving in the right direction for our country, health-wise, of course.
Yeah, man, I agree. And it's such a powerful moment for the Kennedy family, too. I sat and listened to his speech, and there's a lot of things that he talked about that kind of stuck out to me. He said this, as a boy, I sat in the Oval Office where my uncle led the issues on health and fitness. And now, 6 decades later, I stand with the transformational leader who fully grasps the public health crisis our great nation faces. And when he refers to his uncle, JFK, the big thing that JFK was big on was just speaking out about how as a nation we should be young and active and extending our lives so then we can then give to our country more and be more of a tool to our community and to our families and loved ones. And we can't do that if we're sickly and not being able to kind of pull our weight. And this is another quote. In the speech, he has said, "We are under-exercised as a nation. We look instead of play. We ride instead of walk. The future of vigor is swallowed up in the sitting life. Our young people, through less often threatened by the hazards of infancy and childhood, are growing up less fit, less able to contribute their share to an active society."
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And just to touch on this before we get too far from it, it is a huge moment for his family. It's crazy that his family was trying to come out and speak against him when he was getting nominees, but the ones that were speaking against him are the ones that are part of the swamp that's going to get drained. But
yeah, I agree.
It's great, bro. It's great that he's in because, like you said, dude, he's just going to finally start trying to make the nation healthy instead of just, make it to a point to where we're just getting all these diseases. So then the government and other companies can just sit there and profit off of our healthcare. It's going to be, I think, a complete 180 to anything we've seen in our lifetimes, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. Those few family members, they're going to say what they're going to say, and you never really know their true intentions and biases, especially who's funding their bank accounts. Not that anyone is, but as truth begins to come out, we start to see that a lot of people have been funded, whether it's Hillary Clinton's daughter, taxpayer money paying for her mansion, this, that, and the third. To get back on track, basically, I do agree, man. RFK Jr. is pivotal in what he can provide as Health and Human Services Secretary for Trump. And his motto, make America healthy again. And when you look at nations like Japan and how they're able to handle having the lowest obesity rate, is that possible for the United States? I think that's a very, very high bar, but like we should be trying to strive towards that. And it's not that everybody should eat salads every day or everybody should exercise as much as they can every day, but we got to, as a nation, make it easier for people to have the ability to do that, have the resources at hand. We should make exercise and diet as accessible as cell phones and streaming services and all those other things. And when it does also come to the point of what they put in the foods, that's important, is to see all the different things that's inflammatory to our bodies, to our heart. And then you wonder why heart disease is a leading cause of chronic illnesses that kill people. And yeah, man, I think it's important for RFK to come in, and he's not going to blow it up, but he's going to be like, this is where we need to focus on what's important when it comes to what we're putting in our bodies and how we spend our days getting that exercise in whatever form or fashion that is. Just taking a walk around the block, it does wonders for your body long term, and people don't understand because they don't have that long term thinking in the terms of their health, unfortunately.
What I was going to say, man, is that it is a high bar to set for the U.S. to maybe be the lowest obesity rate country. But back when JFK was in office, we were at 3%, right along with Japan. And Japan is still at 3%. And now we're at like 70%. So, I mean, the exercise and everything in our country can't have changed that much. It's just, I think, like you said, more so the ingredients in our food that's banned in other countries, it's not banned in ours. And I mean, we can go down the list. It's one thing or another. I think it's important to also note that just because RFK has criticized vaccines doesn't mean that he's responsible for why people don't trust vaccines. I mean, people were criticizing and talking about vaccines just as long as he has been. It's crazy to try to put that on him, but legacy media is pushing that RFK Jr. is going to make our country sicker and that he's going to kill children. I mean, legacy media was a big part in not wanting him to be confirmed to begin with. So they were pushing that bad narrative about him the entire time from day one since they started talking about him getting in there.
Yeah, it's pretty nasty when they're just continue to push, and this is what they're saying is that RFK Jr. is going to make our country sicker and that he's going to kill children. And that's in the terms of the vaccines. And his biggest thing is he's not against vaccinating children, but it's the fact that we haven't had the certain tests and studies in place to protect vaccine damages to these recipients of it. And I think you had a note on there that talks about just the steps he's going to take in place to make sure that we are checking every box before injecting kids into something that they don't agree to, something they have to get, and something that's going to affect them for the rest of their lives, depending on its heavy metal exposure in the vaccines, rather the side effects end up being more detrimental than what it's solving to begin with. And that's a whole different book.
Yeah, it's crazy because we voted as a nation majority by a long shot for Trump to get in, and Trump getting in comes with his people. And RFK Jr., a lot of people were for him when he was trying to run himself independently, but as soon as he got associated with Trump's party, then everybody flipped. And that's on both sides of the party and everybody in between. A lot of people wanted to flip on him when he decided that he was going to go Trump. But like we've said a whole bunch of times, even most of those people probably voted for Trump. They just don't want to talk about that out in public because, I mean, just the amount of people that we've seen try to give backlash against DOGE, RFK Jr., Tulsi, just the amount of people that's trying to push back doesn't make it seem like Trump won by majority. You know what I'm saying? Like, it seems like if he won by as much as what was said, there wouldn't be that much pushback unless some of these people that are trying to push back were also in Trump's camp and just don't want to say it publicly.
Yeah, man, I agree. And the whole thing too is like, that was a partnership that a lot of people were excited about, me included. And it's just because RFK Jr.'s had a pretty big following when it came to his presidential nomination, and to see them team up is huge. I'm excited about the partnership. I think it's important for our country's future. And one of the biggest things he talked about in the speech was speaking about Trump, was saying he's kept every promise that he's made to me. He's kept his word on every account and gone way beyond it. I'm so grateful to you, Mr. President. A lot of people told me that I couldn't trust you, that I would be better to get it in writing. As we did a handshake, and everything that he told me he was going to do, he has done. And I'm so grateful to him. And I've told you before, I genuinely believe that you are a pivotal historical figure and you are going to transform this country. And I couldn't agree more. And that was a big thing too, is when Kennedy was on the campaign trail, like he wasn't like dogging Trump. He was dogging Big Pharma. He was dogging the Democratic Party and legacy media for supporting him. So seeing them team up is scary, man. And like you see those pictures of Tulsi, Cash Patel, RFK Jr., Pam Bondi, like all these are the Avengers in a sense that are going to push legislation and push executive decisions in the favor of the American people, not anyone else. And that's the biggest thing that stuck out to me and why I'm so excited for his nomination. And we're still waiting on Cash Patel as the last nomination to be director of the FBI. And the sole reason for that is because they're afraid. They're afraid of what Cash is going to go after. He's a hell of an investigator, and he is going to dig to the bottom of what the FBI and what the CIA has been kind of, putting us through as a nation behind our backs and using our taxpayer dollars, which is what matters at the end of the day, selfishly so. And the big thing is Cash teaming up with Tulsi Gabbard, who's the director of national intelligence, and Tulsi being able to set up a portal for people, whistleblowers, to be protected, to voice when their country did them wrong or when they noticed their country doing wrong. So it's huge, man. I'm excited about these nominations. And the biggest thing that a lot of people are excited about, and it's been getting the headlines, is DOGE and kind of what they're cutting. And a lot of people, are really loud against them, but it's not the everyday American that you talk to. A lot of people are kind of excited to see, wow. I mean, excited and pissed for sure, but excited to just see them squirm and panic. And just when if someone's panicking and they just start throwing the most outlandish statements out there. And looking at the DOGE, like Elon and DOGE charge on the IRS, and this is the next agency that they're going to put their sights on, and this is where it's going to get real nasty. The news will tell you it's illegal and that it's a waste what DOGE is doing. Like 86-year-old Congresswoman Maxine Walters, who said people of this country are being violated because all of our privacy has been taken up by Elon and Trump, and we don't know what all they have on us. And when she said that, people don't realize when you're older like that and you've been in this position for so long, sometimes you'll be prone to let stuff slip. And when she said that last part, and we don't know what all they have on us, I just kept thinking of that Cat Williams being, gotcha, bitch. Because like literally you just told on yourself. And it's just what it literally comes out is all these Congress people who a lot of them are way past, their stay in Congress. They just continue to talk about patriotism and how they're taking away our democracy was the same thing they were preaching 6 months ago, a year ago, and it didn't resonate with the American people. And it showed that in the popular vote and the electoral vote. But yeah, I mean, I don't buy any of that stuff. Any of the patriot wannabe protests, the fist pumping in the air at these rallies. I don't buy any of that shit that they're spewing, and that's just how I feel about it.
No, I agree 100%. I think, like we've talked about a couple times now, it's like DOGE was brought in here to evaluate all government spending and what is needed to be trimmed fat-wise on it, and there's a lot of money being spent on a whole bunch of different things that it doesn't need be, and that's been proven just in the few weeks by DOGE, and they're just hardly scratching the surface. So by the time this 4 years is over, by the time 2025 is over, we're going to have a better understanding of where our tax money has went than we ever have before in a year's time, probably even less than that. So I think it's a great thing for our country. A lot of people have been wondering for years and years where our tax money is actually going because we don't see any benefits from paying all these taxes. So I think it's definitely necessary. And I think that there's a lot of fear porn that's being pushed out to scare everybody from it and try to make changes to it. But I think how it's playing out right now is exactly how it needs to play out.
Yeah, I agree. And like the biggest thing they're preaching is that it's illegal. It's completely against, everything our country stands for. It's what DOGE and Trump and Elon's doing. And a lot of it's 14 states that took it to a federal judge to try to stop what DOGE is doing. And the judges basically came out and said, you haven't provided any evidence that they're doing damage to the American people or to the country as a whole. And that's from a Democratic leaning judge as well, federal judge. So it's good to know that she's sticking to the justice. They said, she had mentioned that there was a lot of speculative, this is what we think they'll do with the information, or this is what they can do. And it's like, well, that's not what they're doing. and you have no evidence to show that. And until you do, I'm not going to shut them down from doing what the American people want them to do. And another federal judge granted DOGE permission to look into Elizabeth Warren's involvement. And she was one of the big voices, the blonde-haired lady with glasses that was screaming at RFKjr, worried that he was going to sue pharmaceutical companies at all in his career. And I mean, when you follow the money and you follow the books, like it's gonna, show that she received money and, had different corruption in her past, as, the many different political office positions that she's had. And when you look at her as a whole person, man, this is a woman that lives in a $5 million mansion who falsely claims she's Native American when she is not at all Native American, just to receive a good paying $350K year job at Harvard to teach one class. And then she wants to lecture us about how the system is rigged to benefit the rich. And it's a system that she's a part of and has a big hand in. And it's just going to continue to show. And it's just one of the many examples of the hypocrisy in office. A lot of people talk about the media this, media that. Oh, Republicans have this media source on Fox News and they're pushing this, and then Democrats are pushing this. But these are representatives in our Congress and the Senate who continue to get funded to be anti-America. Ultimately, I'm just glad that it's getting exposed.
I'm glad it's getting exposed as well, too. 100%. I think it's necessary, and it's been a long time coming. It's crazy, dude, because regardless of which site you get your news from, whether it be a more left or more right-leaning site, what's, I think, going to be crucial for people, what's always has been and what really needs to be going forward, is that people don't only read headlines. You can't just trust a headline. It doesn't matter what news source you're getting it from. If they're saying that this person said this or this information was released, go do your due diligence. Look up and make sure, find a video of that person saying it, see if that information was actually released online, because if it was, you can see it before you just go running with it. Because I think that's been a huge issue before this point, and will continue to be a huge issue after this point, but you can't just go off headlines. And so, but basically it's fried because Elon Musk tweeted recently that he will be visiting the IRS next time he's in DC just to say hi. Since I paid the most taxes ever in history for an individual last year, maybe I can have a cookie or something. Biggest troll ever right there, dude.
Yeah, I agree, man. It's so funny because the ones who are really mad are the ones who are the most pissed that he's exposing what he's exposing. And then they just have no logic when they spew why they hate him. When just a couple years ago, man, everybody loved Elon. Everybody loved him when he was, registered as a Democrat or more towards, a libertarian route. People had nothing to say about it.
Yeah, true. And I will say, though, so the National Reconnaissance Office, which is tasked with creating and maintaining satellites for U.S. intelligence, much of the agency's activities, including its budget and headcount, are classified and aren't supposed to be available to the public. But Elon Musk and DOGE created a website in which basically they can track, normal people like you and I can go on there and track our money and where it's going tax-wise and all different kinds of stuff like that. But apparently, when they first dropped the website, they dropped the numbers of the head count with that agency, as well as some of its budget plans, which that information is classified not only to our public, but elsewhere. So that's kind of interesting because DOGE is not supposed to be releasing classified information to the public. They have access to it so they can go through it and decide what's necessary and what's not spending wise. But that information is not supposed to be released to the public, and it was slipped up and posted on that website. I believe it's now been deleted, but it's just interesting, bro. And we're going to see slip ups. We're going to see stuff happen when you're creating entire new branches of the government and, doing something that we've never seen before. There's going to be mess ups. We just got to hope that nothing super critical that could change, things in our country ever get released, which I doubt will, because, everybody will hear about it real fast, but it's going to be fun to watch, man.
Yeah. And I definitely agree. There is definitely, with great power comes great responsibility, and with having access to all that information, it's no different than anybody else who is in a position to look at that information, and there to be whistleblowers or someone who exposes that information. That avenue is always going to be there. But that shouldn't stop the entities from wanting to move toward exposing what, and then with the full transparency, like that is kind of the price you pay. Fuck up on their part where they got to own up to it. And with the doors opportunity to see where all this money is going, there might be slight mishandling, but also like that's just part of this road that we're on to try to get to where we're going in the sense of saving all the money. So then one day we can hope to have no income tax. We can have lower taxes, which in turn will put money back in our pockets. And then once the economy can actually start rolling and they're not going off Biden's inflation numbers like they have been for the last 2 months, we can start to see grocery prices and gas go down as well, which will in turn save us more money. So are they perfect? No, but they've done so much. It's like, okay, don't fuck up. You need to fix this one time and move on. So definitely, I agree. It's definitely something where they messed up. But like, I mean, you were telling me about the Iron Mountain mine and how much wasteful spending was there, hundreds of millions. And that's crazy in itself.
Yeah, that Iron Mountain mine's pretty crazy. I don't think it's something that's common knowledge. I just learned about it. I think they just kind of started talking about it. But the Iron Mountain mine is essentially a mine that's a couple hundred feet underground where they still, to this day, process federal employees' retirements by hand, literally paper and manila envelopes. They've spent upwards of $100 million trying to change it and make it more modern with essentially no success, no changes being made to it. And right now they're only able to process about 10K a month in terms of 10,000 people's retirements in the mine because it's all paper and envelopes and basically old school, which I guess isn't a horrible thing. But I mean, in terms of numbers, it just statistically doesn't make any sense. It just slows everything down. It's basically ancient at this point.
Yeah, it's inevitable and it's not efficient at the end of the day. To spin that, and I mean, you literally have a paper mountain of files that are never going to be touched. And you have to get to a point where you transfer that over digitally to where it's more accessible, but then also more secure. And it's just crazy that it's something so small, and people have talked about it for decades now, where the government has ran on systems that are back from the 80s, the 90s, and it was just not with the times. And it was very, obvious when they were sending out those stimulus checks and people were trying to send back ones from dead relatives that they had gotten, or, they had gotten duplicates, and the government had told them, and this is fact, just hold on to it because it's way more of a hassle to try to process it and resend it out or process it and put it back into the treasury or however that hierarchy system works. But, it just continues to show that our government as a whole is ancient and it does need like you said, being revamped, and it's something that should have been done a long time ago. And now we're coming to the point where now it's being done.
Yeah, they're just so worried about making sure that the next iPhone rolls out every year and the next Windows update, but they don't care about actually updating things within our government, like how we process retirements and things that actually make sense. I mean, like we've talked about, dude, we're at the point now where it's got to be a complete overhaul. Everything's so fucked. There's so much lying and corruption in the government. So many people don't trust the government. It's got to be a complete overhaul, and that's from the bottom up.
Yeah, I agree. And they just continue to say that, oh, it was just the Biden administration. This runs deep. This is 20, 25, 30, 40. This runs really deep. They're just seeing how the most powerful with money, big pharma, military industrial complex, whatever you want to call it, a little bit of all of it. They use these lobbyists to portray this message with high-ranking officials, and it's just put us at a detriment and has seen our inflation, skyrocket to a point where, I mean, our dollar isn't worth anything, and anybody in the financial sector knows that it's our national debt and just the irresponsible spending that we've had. And the spending is like, well, we don't have to worry about it down the road 10, 20 years from now because we'll be dead, because most of the 80-year-olds in Congress will be. And they don't have to deal with this problem because to them, it's not their problem. And it's just, even when you see DOGE coming out and they've already discovered the $2.7 trillion in improper payments in Medicare and Medicaid went overseas to people who should never even gotten it to begin with. And that's 2.7 trillion. And that's something that they just discovered once they set their sights on the IRS. And it's just crazy because this is Medicare and Medicaid. This should be going to our people, our veterans, the people on our streets, the homeless people living on the streets that need that help and that leg up. And it's not. It's going overseas. It's going to migrants. And that isn't conspiracy. That is fact now. It was conspiracy a year ago, 2 years ago. But it's now become 100% fact. Follow the money. It's not going to the American people. And it just blows my mind.
It blows mine too, man. And just so people know, you'll hear us talk about big pharma and stuff like that on this pod a lot. If you don't know about big pharma and stuff like that, it's definitely a deep dive to go into, because once you start looking at the numbers, big pharma pretty much has its hands in everything in this country, from Coca-Cola to pretty much every single thing. That's why we're still the only country at this point that's running pharmaceutical commercials on our TV. And that's because big pharma basically runs this country. So
One
if you
of
don't
two
know
places in the world.
exactly, and if you don't know about big pharma, go ahead and just give that a deep dive, because that's something that's going to take you some days.
Yeah, and you follow the money, you follow big tobacco, how that transformed into big food. The food industry itself is crazy, and that's why they hate RFK so much. It's not just vaccines. It's the
No.
food. It's the chronic disease from the food, from the vaccines. Like, there's just a lot of mishandling. And it's so negligent that it's obvious that it's just for clear profit and that money rules the world. And when you just see that with big food, big pharma, and you just see they just have so much money behind all these officials in government. And now we're, finally getting to see that. And, a lot of them who are being exposed, they're going to come after DOGE, but they can't do anything about it, because the craziest thing is that Obama actually created DOGE. So it was already an entity, in a sense, before Trump and Elon even came in. And the reason I say that is because Obama unintentionally created a perfect deep state IT backdoor. And why I say that is because back in 2014, Obama created the USDS, the United States Digital Service. It was basically created to help Obama kind of oversee the Obamacare website meltdown back then. And it was basically a IT group to fix that setup. And it was actually considered a federal agency. And with the IT backdoors and all the systems and all the agencies, it actually gives USDS access to all federal agencies by law. And the biggest thing is, when Trump and Elon took over, is actually pretty savvy, in my opinion, is they changed the USDS acronym to United States DOGE Service, and has kept the USDS. So the funding had stayed with that agency. So Congress can't defund it because it's not a new program. And the biggest thing is, each team with DOGE consists of a lawyer, an HR rep, a Zoomer nerd, and an investigator. So it's a team. It's not just one person. It's a team that hold each other accountable, that are under DOGE. And at the end of the day, as Trump said many times, and as Elon said, DOGE reports to Trump, and Trump has the final say. And that's the biggest thing. And along the way, just looking back to them finding that back door to where these federal judges can't do anything, and they don't even want to. Like, it's not even the fact that they have their hands tied and they can't do anything. They don't want to, because there's no evidence that they're misabusing things intentionally. Now, we had talked about the slip up with the information when it comes to the satellites. And that's 100% a fuck up on their end, and they got to own that. But was it intentional? Because a lot of these, government officials, a lot of this money investors and lobbyists, they are very intentional in how they're deceiving the American people and wasting their money.
Yeah, they are. And I just think it's sidebar here, but it's funny that, like, the articles that I was reading about the slip up and everything, they all want to talk about how it's DOGE's 21-year-olds making a mistake. Like, that's something that you'll see consistently when you're hearing about DOGE. And every time you hear about a mishap or anything like that, they'll always be like, DOGE and it's 21-year-olds. It's like, dude, these people just graduated school with the knowledge to actually go through these numbers and these documents and all these backdoor things that I'm sure that they have within these government fucking...
It's IT.
It's all IT, bro. And the older generation that's put all this stuff in place probably couldn't even begin to tell you how to work it. Yeah, so that's a whole issue in itself, dude. And they want to keep talking about how it's younger people that's handling all this. They wouldn't be able to tell you how to handle it if they wanted to.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, they'll take all the credit for it if they did do it. And then they wouldn't give any credit to the team itself and say that they did it or they orchestrated it, when we know there's not an 80-year-old doing IT. I'm sure they're out there. I'm not trying, God forbid, an 80-year-old IT expert listens to this, but there's not that's not the people in power, and that's not who they're going to hire. It's going to be a 21-year-old and someone who still has that fresh learning in their brain. Like, this isn't someone who's been out of the trade or out of school for 10, 20, 30 years. It's fresh, and they're not the end all be all. They're just part of a team. And I think that's important when you look at it too, is, it does take a team to do something this big. And like you said, with IT being what it is and how they're able to access all this information, and not just access it, but to have the investigator and the lawyer being able to be like, okay, this is how we look into this, and this is how we don't break any laws doing it. But we can basically see what's gone wrong and report it to DOGE, so then DOGE can then report it to Trump. And then whatever decisions come after that is what it be.
Yeah, for sure. I just felt like that was something that was important to touch base on, because and the reason that they keep saying that is because they're trying to discredit DOGE and the team that's working on this, when I'm sure the people that put this in place for them back when Obama started it, or even before then, I'm sure it was younger people hired by the government to come in and put these, different IT things in place. It wasn't people in the government, I'm sure. So don't let these articles that are talking about 21-year-olds and DOGE and all that take any credit away from the work that they're doing.
Yeah, and people, I mean, you see a lot of videos resurfacing in the last couple of weeks of videos of Obama, videos of Bill Clinton, two Democrats who were preaching that they need to cut back on the government waste and spending to help with the national debt and the deficit that we see as a nation with our dollar. And it's so annoying when they try to put you in that box of, oh, you want the government to run more efficiently. You're MAGA, you're hardcore Republican. It's like, no, everyone should want that. The only ones who don't want that are the ones benefiting off us not having that. And I don't know how it's not more clear. I think it is. I think the everyday person, it is more clear to them. But, the legacy media outlets who are funded by the same people who doesn't want this stuff to get exposed, are the big voices. And just trying to fuel that division among people.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Just to get us back on track here, man. So Elon said that we need to audit the Federal Reserve. That's going to make it real loud and real clear. The news is going to just keep getting crazier and crazier, dude. And I agree with what Glenn Beck said when he said this is when you will see the whole world destabilize because the central banks are a black hole. Same with the Pentagon. And that just comes from the printing and the spending and spending that our government's doing. And some will say that this is how wars were started.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. Like, the central banks are a black hole. And when you look into the history of the 2008 financial crisis, which is like one of the biggest ones that we can go back and research within our lifetimes and remember, what it was like during that time for our families, for our loved ones. Even though we were young, everybody knew the economy was bad. Lil Wayne was putting in this song, Down Like the Economy. And it was a big thing. And it wasn't a problem that we fixed back then. And I had mentioned this in recent episodes that we just continued to kick the can down the road. And now we get to see why. And it's for the most evil reasons and the most sad reasons too.
Yeah, man. I mean, honestly, that's so true, dude. It seems to be that kicking the can down the road is a issue that we've seen in our government for years and years and years. That's why our national debt's built up to the number that it has. And it's crazy. It's crazy, man. I remember seeing a interview with John Stewart and the Secretary of Defense a couple years ago. And the Secretary of Defense said this: the fact that the Department of Defense hasn't passed an audit is not suggestive of waste, fraud, or abuse. That is completely false. She continues to defend that the DOD doesn't have an accurate inventory that we can pull up to see where it's going. And then John argued that in my world, that's waste. She said, how is that waste? He followed, if I give you $1 billion and you can't tell me what happened to it, that's wasteful and that you are not responsible. I mean, I feel like that's about as accurate as it could possibly be, bro. If you have all this money and you're dealing with all this different kind of spending and, anything like that, how would you not be able to have basically an itemized receipt telling you exactly where all that money went? That is extremely wasteful.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I remember seeing that interview too. It's kind of came back up in the news cycle online and social media and all that. And it's just crazy, man, because you actually get to see her specifically in real time, like gaslight John and the viewers in the sense of, that's just not true. It's not wasteful. That's not true. You shouldn't be spewing that. And it's like, what's the definition of waste? Can you explain that? It's wasteful. Thank you. You should have explained it.
Yeah, exactly, man. I mean, at this point, honestly, most of the federal agencies at this point are just basically becoming memes themselves from, they're just all got all this irrational spending. And most of the time they can't even tell you where it's going. And when they can tell you where it's going to either another country or to fund something that the American people as a whole, which we're the ones paying for it, wouldn't agree with. And I feel like at the end of the day, that's why they say they can't tell us where it's going, because they know that at that point, they'd be telling us that our money's going where we don't want it to be.
Yeah, man. And yeah, meme for sure. It's completely hilarious. Just all the info that's coming out and the exposure. And really the most hilarious part is how the media is reacting, how Democrats are reacting. And it's crazy. I tell you, there is hope on the horizon, though. As a new bill has been proposed and it is under review. The bill summary basically states that to promote freedom, fairness, and economic opportunity by repealing the income tax and other taxes, abolishing the Internal Revenue Service, and enacting a national sales tax to be administrated primarily by the states. And this is, one of the campaign points that Trump had talked about, and this is him keeping his word, is taking those steps necessary to abolish the income tax, which will be night and day difference in how much money will go back in America.
Yeah, and people, I mean, since he got in office, the headlines have been reading about Trump was running his campaign, talking about how he was going to make things cheaper and put more money in our pockets, and he's just making things more expensive and blah, 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 blah. Bro, they're just grasping, just quite literally grasping, because the proof's in the pudding. The bill is right there, and that's just one of many. I mean, dude, abolishing income tax, dude, that's something that we never thought we would ever possibly see. I mean, there's that saying, what is it? There's only a few things in life that are guaranteed, and taxes is one of them. Could you imagine, dude, if we didn't have to pay income tax? That would be a complete game changer for everybody.
Among other taxes, too. And that on top of no taxes on overtime, to stack that on top of that. And like I said earlier, on top of that, and waiting 2 years into his term to really see the fruits of his economic policies. It's unfair to judge him off the first couple months of his presidency when half that he wasn't even in office. And they preach on and on about the egg prices and all this other stuff. Give him time to get systems in place. Now, should Trump have came out in his campaign and said, day one, I'm going to make prices lower? He shouldn't have said that. And I'll be the first one to tell you that, because it set unrealistic expectations and also gave anyone against him ammo to basically say, oh, he's lying, he's not keeping his word. I like to see it as day one, he was going to put his attention on it, and it's going to be one of his top priorities. I mean, for a man who's done so much in a short amount of time, he isn't Superman. Like, it takes time for all these steps to get into place so he can start to enact the transitions he wants to make into a more prosperous government. And, and the more prosperous government, like you said last week's episode, is giving more power back to the states. And you can't do that when you have local media pushing all these different things. And people just got to see that the majority of legacy media is backed by these investor groups, the Trilateral Commission, the WEF, USAID had a lot of play in the part. And not just our media propaganda, but propaganda around the world. And a lot of the talking points lately is big on egg prices, right? But egg prices were high long before Trump even got inaugurated. And, a lot of the stats that I'd seen, it said that in 25 days since Trump's inauguration, CNN has mentioned egg prices 45, but in the 25 days before the inauguration, CNN never mentioned egg prices. And over on MSNBC, in the 25 days since Trump's inauguration, they mentioned egg prices 80 times. But in the 25 days before the inauguration, MSNBC mentioned egg prices just one time.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we talk about it, because it doesn't seem like they want to talk about it. But I'm almost positive I read that during Biden's administration, they killed millions of chickens on the hunch of a bird flu getting spread around or something like that.
Yeah, no, 100% they did. But that's not something that is talked about on these news outlets among the people who repeat what's on these news outlets. And that's just, the facts that once you dig, I mean, you really don't have to dig far to find that information. It's out there. And if you look into just basic economics, it's unfair to expect prices to come down this fast. Especially when grocery prices, honestly, they're one of the biggest things that hit Americans, but it's not grocery prices themselves. It's what it costs to get the groceries to the shelves. It's what it costs to produce the goods. And when you look at what it takes, working, like you said in the last couple episodes, is with the drilling and making energy cheaper, and also building the infrastructure to make it easier for these systems to transport the goods. That's just a smaller scale on the big wide net of improvements he's trying to make. And then you just kind of see different hit pieces just constantly going on and on. And it's funny too, because even on MSNBC, Rachel Maddow, you had this big whole spew about how Musk has convinced the government to spend $400 million on armored Teslas. That's definitely not corrupt or ripping us all off. And it's well, hold on, two things here. The armored trucks, Tesla develops the best electric armored trucks, night and day different. They have the technology. And the biggest thing is Elon has been getting contracts from the US government way before Trump got in office this time around. Because, like we talked about earlier, people used to love Elon before he supported Trump, which wasn't really prominent until Trump got the attempted assassination on Trump, and that's when his full backing of Trump came from. And before that, Elon was really just a big voice for free speech when he bought Twitter, which the left obviously doesn't like that. So that's where you kind of seen the shift. And now you have where when she was talking about the $400 million armored trucks, not only is that important for the military to have armored trucks, but it wasn't even Trump that issued that contract. It was something that was issued during the Biden administration, which later an anchor on Fox News followed that up on and kind of exposed her for. It was Trump wasn't the one that gave Elon that contract for the 400 armored trucks. It was Biden who gave him the contract. So right there just shows the pure lies that they're spewing and how they're able to twist the story to push that narrative that they want to push.
Yeah, and the headlines going around I was reading today was talking about how it's crazy that Elon Musk is wanting jail time for people with 60 minutes. But I have notes right here just talking about how 60 Minutes falsely said that President Trump does not have the right to shut down U.S. aid by executive order, but U.S. aid was created by an executive order in 1961 by JFK, and anything created by executive order can be shut down by executive order. So, and that's just one instance of 60 Minutes specifically, not even talking about how like the interview they did with Kamala, where they completely changed her responses to questions they asked and what they released to the public rather than what she actually said. That in itself should be a crime. That somebody needs to be held responsible for that, because we can't be getting false information from a presidential candidate during their campaign pushed out by legacy media for the world to see. That's corruption in the presidential campaign right there. Somebody should be held accountable for that. I don't know if it's necessarily jail time, but something has to be done about that. Yeah, somebody's got to get held accountable for all that, bro. And here's another one I have notes on here where Reuters are out here writing a hit piece against DOGE, and Musk tweets, "I wonder what Reuters are being paid. DOGE uncovers Department of Defense contract paying Reuters for large-scale social deception." That's another mismanagement of our tax dollars right there, buddy.
Yeah. And we're literally funding propaganda. And when it comes out that U.S. aid was funding 90% of Ukrainian media outlets, and, come to find out, it's because most citizens don't even agree with the media that's pushed in Russia, which is pro-war, pro-war, pro-war. They didn't even want this war to begin with. The average, everyday, normal Ukrainian person didn't want this war. And they say it was USA and NATO who did things to cause Putin to invade Crimea in the first place. And they kind of just feel like they're stuck in between two dictators who are quarreling over issues and people that have no power to do anything about it. And when you see like the media and how manipulated it is, you see here that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has committed millions to media companies. And, we're completely against Bill Gates and all his intentions in the world, all his island visits and everything else, and how he feels about medicine and vaccines, and how he talks about how it's inevitable that we'll face a next pandemic in the near future. And it's really disgusting, bro, to see that our taxpayer dollars are funding propaganda on not only ourselves, but underdeveloped countries around the whole world.
Yeah, it is super crazy, dude. And that's why I think it's very important what DOGE is doing, and that it's becoming transparent where our money is actually going. The New York Times alone received 3.1 million in taxpayer funds, while the UK's BBC received 3.2 million. What are we doing funding the UK's BBC? Like, how does that even make sense? Why is our tax dollars funding a United Kingdom's media outlet? How does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, and I think J.D. Vance said it perfectly in his speech with a lot of the European countries at a conference that just happened this last week. And he just basically told them, he was like, you guys have let this unrest happen, and not only UK, but all these countries over in Europe, to where you left your borders open. You've pushed propaganda down your people's throats, and you're allowing all this crime. And there's people in UK who get arrested for posting a meme that's anti-government. Now, we know they don't have freedom of speech over there, but it just kind of shows how bad it can get if there was powers in place to let the United States get to that point. And a lot of people gave him full props for kind of just exposing what goes on over in Europe and kind of not just the democratic mindset of what they're trying to plan, but it's really the globalist agenda. This is more than just the Democratic Party of the United States. This is a globalist agenda to crumble societies among the whole country that isn't China and Russia. And it all starts in the Middle East too. And, it's just something where we have to be able to weed out the toxicity among the whole world as the superpower. That's our responsibility, and kind of cutting off and being able to go and kind of go against the norm of what's been pushed the last 4 to 8 years overseas, and being that model and that representation of what nations should strive for. And it's not something you see in Canada. It's not something you see in the UK. It's not something you see in Germany.
Yeah, it's crazy to know that the United States has quite literally been essentially pushing propaganda around the entire world. I mean, DOGE found nearly 5,000 media outlets funded by U.S. aid alone, including Politico, New York Times, CBS, and even the BBC. At least 500 million fueling a worldwide industry of propaganda and censorship.
Yeah, and you have to wonder what's the reason for that, other than, and it's just not letting it be and letting like free market. And we know about like the CIA and their history with coups and setting up different powers, and why even the president in Ukraine right now, who is highly unsupported by his people, was essentially put in that position by the CIA. And, we'll get into that in the future whenever more advancements happen in the peace talks, which from the looks of it, Ukraine is not wanting to end the war. Yeah, man. And some of the news stories that came out amongst the media sources and just kind of shows the craziness of some of these representatives, specifically with the Democratic Party, is over in Ohio, Democratic lawmakers have proposed a new law that bans men from ejaculating without the intent of conception. It would be considered a felony, and they would face a fine up to $10,000 per ejaculation.
I don't even know what to say to that, dude. That sounds like complete madness. And their literal argument behind that is just, we have a real problem because men have full reproductive rights and women don't. And they're trying to call the act Contraception Begins at Erection Act.
Yeah, you
Bro,
can
like
make this shit up.
Yeah, I'm like reading this right now, and I feel like I'm reading a description to an episode of South Park or something. Like, there's no way this is the real life that we're currently living in. But it is. And guess what? A whole bunch of taxpayer money, I'm sure, is funding whatever legal teams and people in office and all that are working to push this bill. Like, that's the kind of silly things that our money is getting wasted on. It's like, how? Just how? That's all I can say to that.
Yeah, and it's crazy because, like you said, they're going to have to put a legal team on this to review it. It's wasting time and resources that can be used on more productive stuff within that field. And they're wanting to make it a felony. And AB6 News asked viewers if it was a waste of time or a good idea, and 74% said it was a waste of time.
Exactly. It's like, how are they even going to know these things? Do they think that guys are going to start turning themselves in for jacking off? Or are they going to monitor your phone camera and be like, you just got caught jacking off, alert, alert? Like, what do you even mean, brother?
Yeah.
Oh, is this
real? Do I get tax breaks for having blue balls? Like, if I'm saving it, like, what's that look like? And then also, 26% of the viewers for AB6 said it was a good idea. 26%.
You know what that means, buddy? That was straight blue hairs calling that one out.
I don't know what that means. But yeah, there is a certain majority of people who are sick in this country, and that 26% is sick for that. And I hate to say it, bro, because Democrats this, Democrat that, but this shit I see is what makes them so wild. And these are the ones that are in position. Like, people say, oh, it's not that bad. You're just talking about the radical side of it. It's like, but then you see this. This is like a prime example of, no, they're actually trying to push this. And, I will say, Republicans aren't innocent either. There's Republicans like Mitch McConnell who support all this crap and the corruption. The only guy amongst Bernie Sanders and other, Bernie Sanders is an independent, but then follows everything that Democrats say. Same with Mitch McConnell. These are the corrupt guys, and it's on the Republican side too. And it makes conservatives and libertarians look like saints when the Democratic Party specifically is just continuing to crumble. It's crazy, bro, because there's already people in position in the Democratic Party, even the new chairs now, that are getting caught up in corruption. And I'll stay on this hill that I don't think by 2030 the Democratic Party will be as big as it is now, because you're already seeing a divide there within people who are just like, yo, I have libertarian beliefs, liberal beliefs, but I do not agree with the radical side. Just like a lot of Republicans don't agree with the radical side of the right when it comes to abortion, when it comes to, the help that we give Americans in the forms of Medicaid and Medicare. A lot of hardcore Republicans don't agree with that. And, as you and I specifically, a lot of our views, if people actually asked us, our views, we do have a lot of libertarian views, and a lot of conservative views, which most people have conservative views. If they want to raise a family, they do put family first, God first, and country first. Those are conservative views, and they shouldn't be, something that's frowned upon or seen as corny. And everybody wants to put you in a box. People would watch our podcast and automatically assume that we're diehard Republicans, when some of the people we support the most, RFK Jr., Elon, Tulsi Gabbard, were all part of the Democratic Party and up and left because they seen the corruption that was going on and just the stuff that's been set up in place over decades between Obama and the Clintons, and just seeing where it has gotten to us today. And people will say, well, Trump was he was president for 4 years and he didn't expose any of this. Honestly, I don't think Trump had the resources, the tools, nor the balls to do it the first time around, because he didn't want to ruffle so many feathers to where he could be reelected. And he wasn't reelected until now. And now he can't be nominated for another term. So whatever he's got now. And now he actually has a team around him, which is different from the first run, where they actually are able to kind of take his views and put them into place. And, we say all this now, and I'm firmly believe when 2028 rolls around, you're going to see me voting independent if RFK Jr. run. And that's just how it is. And I think people's political views change, especially with the Democratic Party, because it's not what it used to be. And the views of that party have changed in the last 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, I think the views of both parties have been changed, this way or that way over the years. But like you said, I think in the coming elections that we're going to see a lot more eyes on independent parties. I mean, Trump himself began running as an independent his first time. He pretty much had to pick a party so that way, because that's the only way you're actually going to get traction in the election. But I don't think that's going to really be the case anymore. There's so many people that have views that lean left, right, in the middle. And it's hard to really, like you said, almost put yourself in a box for you to decide which person. That's kind of what you have to do. This one, it was kind of easy because it seemed Kamala just lacked common sense. But
yeah.
And I mean,
you might not have been Republican, but a lot of people who don't represent the Republican Party voted Republican. And that doesn't, just because they voted Republican doesn't mean it makes them a diehard Republican for the rest of their lives.
Well, yeah, I agree, bro. At the end of the day, I think, like we've kind of talked about this for a long time, a huge division is just, are you right or left? Do you lean right or blue? Like, that shouldn't matter. What matters at the end of the day is policies. And it matters which team, whether it be left, right, or in the middle, who is speaking about the best policies for everybody all around. And that's just what we got to focus on from here going forward, not which party you identify with or whatever.
Yeah, it's very easy to divide and conquer. And even when you're looking at the history of the red and blue party, they didn't put colors on it until the early 2000s. It was a 99 or 2000 election between Bush and Al Gore. Like, this was something to where it made it easier for them to just have team A, team B. You pick a side. Can't be in the middle. You got to pick a side. And it's just not how it should never be black and white, because none of these issues are black and white. And that's the biggest thing. But yeah, man, I think it's beautiful to be able to see. We're going to continue to report on it. And we haven't even started to see the craziness when it comes to the files being released, to all the list, the Epstein list. And we're going to get into how Kash Patel, still being held back by the House of Representatives and the Senate to get in the position to provide that info. But on a less serious note, we can go ahead and transition. I know we got this crazy story that we found. I'll go ahead and let you lead off on that.
Yeah, man. So your iRobot Roombas have been spying on you. And it's not just them. There's a whole multitude of different devices that are doing it, but the Roombas specifically have had captured and leaked private images, including one of a woman on a toilet. Dude, how is that real? What is going on? I feel like we've talked about from time to time, dude, we've skipped timelines.
Yeah. And it's crazy because, like, a big topic in 2000, 2001, the Patriot Act, biggest thing was, we're losing privacy. Like, we're going to get to a point where, we don't have privacy anymore. And I mean, it's gotten to the point where you don't even have privacy in your own bathroom. And just imagine, man, you're just having the shit of your life and your Roomba is just staring at you, judging you as you're hugging your knees. Like, that's just blows my mind.
Dude, and the Roombas, I feel like, are probably just the beginning of it. I mean, that was kind of a big thing when they first started coming around, like the tech side of things. But, I mean, now we got smart refrigerators, smart microwaves. We got everything that's smart. I don't want that. I don't want all that smart stuff, bro. What does that mean? I don't need my microwave to tell me how long I need to heat up my chicken tenders, dude. Like, I just want to put it in there, click a time, and let it ride. I mean,
watching movies on your refrigerator is crazy. And like,
dude,
I understand that like when we were kids, our parents and grandparents had little box televisions on top of the fridge, you know, playing 24/7, whatever channel it was on. And that's completely different than going on your fridge above the ice maker panel and putting in a YouTube video to watch. And you can only see the angle of the video if you're standing directly in front of the fridge. What's the point of that? And yeah, it's just easier for people to hack into that stuff. And it's like, do you really need it? And yeah, it can be convenient, but like, we know what the more convenient life looks like, and it's not as fulfilling, I would say, you know, because you spend that time in the kitchen, maybe throw some tunes on. You don't need to be watching something. You can prepare some food, maybe clean up the kitchen, organize a little bit. You don't need to be staring the fridge right in front and just watching a YouTube video or playing games on your fridge. It's just blows my mind. They're making it more accessible to waste time, and they're even putting it on your fridge. And the big thing too is people have to remember, like, the big thing to help if you do have these devices is to disable cloud sharing in the iRobot app, and also to use a Roomba without a camera. And if you do have a camera on your Roomba, to go ahead and put some electrical tape over that camera, as the Roomba does use it to connect to the dock to see what's in its path. And also, man, you just got to secure your Wi-Fi, and that's an important thing that's been recent years is like data protection. You see these services and companies that promote, you know, different data protection for you, your identity, your Wi-Fi services, rather that's a VPN, and just setting up, you know, smart passwords that isn't just regular based passwords.
Yeah, man. And really, it's not even just the Roomba. It's anything that's smart. It's anything that connects to your Wi-Fi. Anything that connects to your Wi-Fi has basically internet capabilities, can be hacked. And that's where all this, you know, crazy things like images from a Roomba camera is coming from. It's literally just people hacking into your Wi-Fi and then getting access to whatever devices you actively have on your Wi-Fi. So like you said, you got to have strong, unique Wi-Fi passwords. You got to be covering your cameras when they're not in use. You got to be secure in your Wi-Fi, reviewing your app permissions. You know, you got to be putting all those steps in place at this point to make sure that you and your family aren't getting taken advantage of. And you could be, and you guys don't even know it. That's what's the craziest part about it.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll tell you what, man, we've covered a lot. I mean, spanning all the way from kind of how DOGE was blocked by the 14 Democratic states trying to stop their path of the IRS and the Federal Reserve and the Department of Defense spending. So they are full flood ahead. We're going to have all the info that gets exposed from that. And I think the biggest thing, too, is to remember that to ask more. You know, it's important to ask more when given these empty headlines and notice what specific words they're using to try to push fear. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt is FUD, what they call it. And, you know, the biggest thing they preach is, you know, I didn't vote Elon. I didn't vote Elon. It's like, well, all I keep thinking about is I didn't vote for Mark Zuckerberg to have a monopoly on social media. I didn't vote for Bill Gates to have his hand in every medical procedure around the world and medical developments, as well as having connections to the most disgusting island in the history of islands, which will continue to go on and expose all involved with that. And talk about island participants, they had the SNL 50th anniversary, and Tom Hanks wanted to portray a racist MAGA supporter. And I mean, if he's one of the biggest names that pop up in those lists, it's kind of a gimme at this point that he had ties to Epstein Island. And it's like, this man is just continuing to be part of that entity and that swamp. And, you know, not to say, you know, if there are racist people in the world, they probably are Trump supporters, but it doesn't make every Trump supporter a racist. And the biggest thing I also say is I didn't vote for George Soros to control literally everything when it comes to media, medicine, all that. George Soros, and people who don't know, is one of the most powerful individuals and most corrupt individuals who has a lot of money and power and fully backed the whole globalist idea. And it does not have America in those plans of the globalist agenda too.
Yeah, and for anybody that doesn't know about the globalist agenda, take your time, go do some reading on that. That's pretty crazy idea in itself. Yeah, man, I think it's important. The American people will continue to gain hope for more government transparency, accountability, and efficiency. People don't need to be fearful of Elon and Trump. They need to be fearful of what power and money will do to try and stop them and hold the mission that they have of draining that swamp that we've all been wanting to happen for years now.
Yeah, man. I mean, we covered a lot. I'm excited to go into week 5. And I know we said that we were going to dive into COVID a little more, but I think there's still some more info to come out. We do have a little bit when it comes into Fauci and the ties to Congress and all that good stuff. But yeah, man, I mean, this was a pretty good episode. And, it only starts. We'll be back next Monday for week 5.
Yes, sir. Everybody make sure you're updating your passwords. Be safe.